Hello everybody, this is Starman and welcome to the first chapter of Let's Play Betrayal at Krondor. Now, Betrayal at Krondor is a special game to me for several reasons. It was one of the first role-playing games I ever played. I actually bought this one with birthday money that came out. It came out 2 days after my birthday when I was a teenager. And I bought it purely because it was made by Dynamics, who were a subsidiary of Sierra Online, and I was buying every adventure game by Sierra Online and LucasArts games, or Lucasfilm games as they were back then. And this one, I went into not knowing anything about Raymond Feist or any of the Rift War novels, but after playing this game, I went out and bought them and read them and absolutely fell in love with his world. And more than any other fantasy role-playing game based on an established property, this game totally captured the essence of Feist's world. Now, that may have been because he had a hand in making sure that they portrayed it properly. He did not write the script for the game, but he did have input into the story and making sure that his world was being portrayed properly. And a funny story about Feist is that he was an old-school pen-and-paper role-playing game enthusiast who created this world with several of the other people he played with. They all contributed little bits to it here and there, and they still maintain the world of Midkemia as its own licensed property, which Feist just wrote novels based upon, or set in the same setting as it. And the funny thing is that I really liked this one statement I read by Feist at one point when he was asked about being a fantasy writer, and he said, "I don't think of myself as a fantasy writer. I'm a history writer who chronicles a world that can't possibly exist." And that sets him apart from a lot of other fantasy writers in my mind, because for the most part his stories focus more upon the characters and less about the world building. Now, he does build a fantastic world, and we're going to get to explore a good portion of it in this playthrough. But for Feist, the stories were always more about the character and less about the mechanics. Now, I know there's probably a lot of people who would dispute that, because mechanically he does have a very wonderful world, but you know, this story is all about the characters and less about making up a language or setting up 50 zillion different rules for how the magic works. It's just a story about good, decent people fighting evil and trying to save the world. Which, okay, that describes the vast majority of fantasy, but why don't I stop talking and we just go ahead and get into the game? Yeah, I'm going to be quiet for the opening credits because you're not going to be able to hear me over the music anyway. Frau Blucher! Okay, apart from that. So we don't have much time before the music cycles back around, but there's no ability to turn down the music in this game, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to turn most of it off. for the duration so you can hear me. Which is unfortunate because this game does have a great soundtrack, and I do love the music from it, but when it comes to a choice of you being able to hear my commentary and being able to enjoy the music, well, that's not much of a choice from my perspective now, is it? If you do want to hear the music, though, there are many places online where you can hear the tracks, and I will stay silent during the introductions, except for when I need to read the texts. Actually, I may include both so you can get to hear the music and hear me doing the voices of the characters, which I am going to try and act a little bit as I'm reading the dialogue, because there's some great dialogue here as well. I'm probably going to run through my repertoire of British accents very quickly, though. So bear with me if I'm doing some sillier voices for certain characters. But we will go ahead and start a new game. So we start with Chapter 1, Into a Dark Night. And there's probably going to be some weird colorization effect here. Well, there was the first time I played through this to make sure that the version of this game which I downloaded from Good Old Games worked. And there probably will be some between the transitions between this nice little book effect and the action sequences with the digitized actors, but, well, we'll get to that when we come to it. Blood-soaked rags collected at the boy's feet. One by one he tended the wincing soldier's purple wounds, stitched, salved, bandaged, did what little he could in the leaping golden halo of firelight. Fortunately for his roadside patient, he could do more than most. Fingers slick with alum ointment, he worked feverishly to tie off a catgut cord, then brushed the injury with a light touch that to the untrained eye would seem only a friendly pat. Others would recognize the telltale hand gesture as a magical ward against infection. "Done," Owyn sighed, wiping his hand with a rust-covered cloth. "No guarantees, though. The stitches may hold all the way to the mutt, and then you again push too hard and you could be bleeding like a stuck pig in Midsummer's." "You did fine," Sir Locklear replied. I'm going to go ahead and say Sir Locklear instead of Senior Locklear, because Sir Locklear means the same thing, and they'll alternate between Sir Locklear and Senior Locklear in the text later on anyway. Senior Locklear replied, smiling approval before rolling down his sleeve. "It'll scar, but it's good for a noble's reputation. Lets the kingdom folk know he isn't resting on his laurels, and it impresses the ladies. I'll be sure to look you up in Tyburn if I ever need stitching up again." The boy accepted the compliment with a humble nod while he packaged away the rest of his medical supplies, his thoughts focused instead on a third man who slumped in the shadows across from them. Despite the manacles that bound the stranger's hands and the distance that separated them, the boy felt dreadfully exposed, his avenues of escape limited, should Locklear's elven-looking prisoner decide to liberate himself. "What did he do?" Owyn whispered, jerking his head towards the man. "Gorath, let's say that he had the disadvantage of being at the wrong place at the wrong time," Locklear said cautiously. He snatched a greenish apple out of his knapsack, offering one to Owyn. "I have to take him to Krondor." "Did he kill somebody?" Owyn asked. "No. He attacked you." The seigneur wiped apple juice from his mouth before his mouth shook his head. That line there doesn't make me know. Wiped apple juice from his mouth, shook his head. "No, not exactly." "Well, who cut you up then?" Before Locklear could reply, and there's the weird pixelization. Gorath leapt forward, his chains rifing between his wrists like metallic vipers. "Get up from underfoot, Owyn! Assassins in the camp!" "Do not struggle so, Hasef. I wish to keep you alive. But be grateful I do not. The goddess of death will show you greater mercy." And yes, curiously enough, this version of the game does not have the digitized sound effects that the original game did. So we won't be hearing any of the 2-second snippets of spoken dialogue that came with the original release of this, even in the 3 1/4 disc version. But here we are, the world of Krondor, and we have a dead body in front of us. Thinking only made it worse. Setting aside his reservations about pilfering the fallen, he decided he would take what the goddess of luck had given them. However immoral he might feel about it, he was certain his stomach would quickly assuage his guilt if he found a bit of food to eat. And we start off with rations. Laying the brown parcel aside, Locklear carefully undid the short link of string that bound the package. Although snare rations generally contained sweet salt meats, hard rolls, sliced apples, and strawberry tarts, he was eager to get whatever food was inside. And lockpicks. Reaching into the velvet pouch, Gorath withdrew a sterling silver lockpicking tool. He studied it carefully, marveling at the unmatched precision of its craftsmanship. Now, I'll go ahead and give those to Locklear because he has the best lockpicking skill of the party, and we'll split the food between everybody. And an important note that I'm going to make here, in this game, you always look at food before you take it, because there's a chance that food can be spoiled, or that food can be poisoned. And an ounce of prevention saves you a ton of money on healing potions later on. So yes, as you can see, we're looking at a rather sparse digitized landscape, but we do have the ability to walk around in 3D. Gorath seemed distant. Though the Mortal warrior didn't appear grieved about killing the assassin that followed them from the Northlands, his eyes held a baleful look in them that seemed something between hatred and rage. Several times he glanced back at the corpse that lay behind them in the dust, his thoughts unguessable from his expression. "Do you wish to bury him? We could do that." "It is not our way. I am simply somewhat disturbed that he should come after me. He was a kinsman. There are other things that trouble me as well. Delacon's assistants are slow, but not altogether stupid. Another like Hasef, and you'll only have my corpse to drag before your Prince Arufa. Sorry, you don't get off that easy. As long as you're under my command, you're forbidden to die, Morid Hell. I've gone through too much trouble to keep you alive to bury you now. It's time we took the chains off of you. It'll be far easier for you to defend yourself if your hands are free to swing a sword again." "You're not just going to set him free, are you? I thought you said he was your prisoner." "Well, he is my prisoner, Owen, but the circumstances are terribly complicated. Even if he chose to sneak off, he'd be lucky to make it to the next town alive. This is the third such assassin we've run into since we've left the Northlands, and I have a feeling there'll be more waiting for us. He'd be much safer with me as I am with him." As the boy would be if he were to whisper the wrong word in the wrong ear. He could easily be the deaf of us. "Me? Who am I going to talk to? I'm not even heading in the same direction." "It wouldn't be a matter of who you talk to, and there'll be ears listening for word of a Morid Hell traveling with a noble. Damnation, I should have thought about this when you entered camp. For the time being, you're my squire. Once we arrive safely at the palace, you'll be free to go on your way." "But I've got pressing business in Tyburn." "This is not a subject of debate. We must get to Krondor. My mission is of critical importance. I don't have time to improvise an easy solution. The only other possible option would be to slit your throat and leave you dying, and I have absolutely no desire to do that. Now let's get moving before Delacon's assassins catch our scent again. They'll most likely come looking when Hasef doesn't return from his mission." So, yes, now that we've got established that we've got a knight escorting a prisoner and a noble boy with healing training and magical training who just happened to stumble across them, we can look at our interface. Well, we have the map here that lets us see the world. We have our character portraits here. We've got a compass showing direction, which we're currently looking southeasterly. And then we have the magic symbol. Fire, which is used for making camp, which it's early in the day. We have the main menu here, the bookmark, which lets us quickly save our game, and the map, which will show us our immediate surroundings, but also, if we click on this, it gives us a map of our game world, or at least the part that we can explore. Now, our goal for this chapter is that we are supposed to get from where we are here up in Yabin all the way down to Krondor over here. And this is probably a good time for me to mention that this is the western half of what is known in the Rift World books as the Kingdom of the Isles. Well, actually, this portion right here under this line is the Kingdom of the Isles, as is a little bit of the land over here. Over here is the eastern part, but we will not be able to go there during this game. And we have this middle area right here. The green area is called the Dimwood. Not quite so bad as the Darkwood. And we can highlight the various towns here. Now, of course, you'd think we'd want to take the quickest route possible down the coast to get to Krondor, but while that is the fastest route, it is not the most profitable one, and we will benefit, especially at this early stage, with a bit of exploration. And that's one of the best things about this game, is that it does encourage exploration and careful planning. So even though we do want to head south and reach the town of Lamut eventually, we're going to start out going north, just because it's amusing to do so. And from this map mode, we can actually zoom in and zoom out to get a better look at our surroundings. And we can see there's a long road here, two other dirt paths here. And we can actually cut a bit of a corner by going due east from here. And this takes us to the town of Yabin, which it's a bit funny because Yabin, as we see it here, is going to appear to be a very small town. But in the mythology of Raymond Feist's books, Yabin is probably the fourth largest duchy in the Kingdom of the Isles. You'd never know it from this game, though. And a quick little note on that, because something I recalled is that if you left-click on our character globe, it'll bring up the character's inventory. And we can see Locklear has an armor and sword, Owen has a simple staff and no armor, and Gorath has much the same. And from here we can see a collection of all the keys that we have, unique and not so unique, and our party gold is down here. Locklear checked their funds, although the values had fluctuated in the past 5 years due to trade disagreements with Kesh, Kesh being the nation to the south. The last time he had checked with traders, there had been 10 silver royals to each golden sovereign, a favorable exchange, assuming, of course, they had some of either type of coin. After thoroughly searching all their possessions, he discovered they had 14 sovereigns and 3 royals. And then from here we can right-click on a character to bring up their character sheet. We can see their condition, if they're poisoned, sick. Currently Locklear's at full health. He has a speed of 4 and a strength of 17. And we can see his statistics here. Not bad as far as the knight goes. He's better with a sword than he is a crossbow, which does fit the character in the game. More of an offensive fighter than a defense fighter. Obviously, as a non-magician, he does not have casting power. And he's pretty good at assessment, armor craft, weapon craft. Not so great at things such as scouting, stealthing, lockpicking, all of the roguish skills. But we're going to go ahead and improve some of his skills. By clicking on a skill and highlighting in red, we can have him focus on training that skill, although it typically is not best to highlight too many, because otherwise you might as well not focus at all. And we can click on the character's portrait to switch between them. Owen will want to have focus on casting, and we'll go ahead and focus on melee as well for him, because here we can see he's pretty good at casting, but he has no skill in tending armor, pretty decent at handling social things like barding and haggling. And Gorath, he is strong but slow. Go ahead and put him down for more. Now, he being an elf, well, a dark elf to be technical, is better with a bow than he is with a sword, but he's no slouch in the tending to weapons and armor category either, and he is the best scout that we have. And from here we can also click on the character portrait, actually it's right-click, to bring up a biography of each of our characters. Son of the Baron of Landsian, Locklear has achieved great notoriety while serving Arufa Condoin, Prince of Krondor. Decorated for his service at the battles of Armengar and Sephana during the war known as the Great Rising, he is one of the most honored nobles at the court of Krondor, and in many respects is considered an unofficial member of the royal family. In the 9th year of the reign of King Liam I, Locklear entered the services of a northern kingdom garrison to investigate reports of a conflict raging in the Northlands. Shortly after his arrival, his military escort was attacked by Moradhell raiders, and Locklear found himself cut off from his companions. Later, upon seeing someone fleeing a Moradhell warrior, Locklear slew the aggressor, only to discover the man he had saved was in fact a Moradhell himself, Gorath of the Ardanien clan. And I should at this point note that Moradhell is the Elvish word for dark elf, and that there are in fact several types of elves in the reality of the Rift War world. We have the Light Elves, the Eladhel, the Dark Elves, the Moradhell, and the Mad Elves, or the Wild Elves, who are called the Glamoredhell. I think I'm pronouncing those right. And we'll get into their mythology a little bit later. I had actually thought about reading a summary describing the first couple of Rift War books as a prelude to this Let's Play, but I thought it might be more natural to explain things as we come across them in the game rather than me reading a description of the books early on. Besides, what's the point of you going out and seeking these books out later if I just tell you about them now? But anyway, Locklear is one of the characters taken from the books. He is a squire when we first see him in the books. At this point, 10 years after the last book in the series at the time this game came out. Well, actually, now that I think about it, timeline-wise, I think they did have one of the future books come out. But there were originally 3 books in what became known as the Rift War series. There was Magician, Silverthorn, and A Darkness at Sephinon. Locklear was introduced as a supporting character in Silverthorn, but then went on to play a bigger role in A Darkness at Sephinon. And then this game, Betrayal at Krondor, takes place 10 years after the end of A Darkness at Sephinon, so Locklear has progressed from being a squire in his mid-teens to being a knight in his mid-20s. Now, our other 2 party members are brand new to this game. So let's look at Owyn. More often than not, Owyn Belford has been a political embarrassment to his father, the Count of Tyburn. As a result, he has been given a degree of freedom even his elder brothers are envious of, though his father hopes he will one day settle down enough to become a marriageable suitor for the daughter of the Duke of Upper. For far craftier than he's often given credit for, Owyn has a keen eye for detail and can often see patterns invisible to those around him. All his life, Owyn has dreamed of studying magic, and on many occasions has set elaborate plots in motion to spend time with his masters of the arcane crafts. He undertook his most notable endeavor when he was only 14 and vacationing in the city of Ron. Having spent the previous summer needling the household staff about his father's accounts, Owyn discovered a means of redirecting a portion of his father's wealth and managed to hire a magical tutor for nearly 7 months. Finally, his father detected his activities and recalled him home to Tyburn. Thereafter, the Belford household was ordered to strict silence when in Master Owyn's presence. So, yes, he's your typical minor noble son, wants to be a magician, dad said no, and they changed his background in the novel, strangely enough, and I should actually mention that this game proved to be so successful that Feist later not only declared it canon to his universe, he also wrote the adaptation of the game into a novel, which was named Krondor the Betrayal, and was going to spark off another mini-series of books, 3 of which came out. The last 2 have not been released in the United States, although apparently you can get a hold of them in ebook format from places online. And we'll check the background for Gorath here. Although he is an eligible claimant to the Moradhel throne in Sar Sargoth, Gorath has never desired to meddle in the politics of the Northlands, but often he has had little choice. He has been notably vocal in his criticism of the leadership of Delicon, a Moradhel who distinguished himself during the Great Rising as one of Mermandus' field generals and later claimed the throne of Sar Sargoth for himself. Yes, I should note that the Great Rising was the battle detailed in A Darkness at Sephinon, where Mermadamus, who was a legendary Moradhel war hero, reportedly came back from the dead and led an alliance of dark elves, goblins, giants, trolls, all of the nightmarish humanoids in an invasion on the Kingdom of the Isles. It turned out that he had goals other than just getting back at our human oppressors, but we will get to that in the story of this game in good time. Gorath himself has led an impressive military career, and during the Rift War he directed one of the only Moradhel defensives to successfully withstand Serani aggression. As he beat back invaders, thousands of Moradhel escaped their homes in the Greenheart Forest to the safety offered by the Northlands. Only starvation and superior Serani numbers eventually drove Gorath and his tribe of the Ardeen to flee across the great northern mountains to their waiting cousins. And another note about the Serani, who we will actually get to meet one of them soon, but it occurs to me that I need to explain the Rift War very quickly. The setting of the Rift War takes place between 2 worlds, Midkemia and Kelawon. Midkemia is the world of the Kingdom of the Isles, where we are, and Kelowon is an alien world very similar to feudal Japan. The Surani magicians managed to find a way to open a portal between their world and Midkemia, and being a warlike people, they invaded. This led to a war between the western half of the kingdom and the Kelowon people, so the Surani, and it was largely a war of attrition because while the Surani had superior numbers, the kingdom had better tactics. Well, things eventually did come to something of an agreeable end, or would have if a legendary magician hadn't blown up the portal, but we'll get to that as well. For now, it is enough to say that several of the Surani got trapped on Midkemia, but were offered clemency by King Liam, who had just been crowned king at that point, and basically offered a chance to regain their honor serving their former enemies and helping to replace some of the forces that got depleted in the area around the city of Lamut, which, as I mentioned before, normally would be our first target, and it's the first place they plan for you to come to in this game, but we're going to mess with that a little bit, because oddly enough, you can profit a bit more if you head north instead of south. So let's head into Yavin proper. It's best if we move through town as quickly as possible. I left a wedding party here not too long ago, and it might raise unpleasant questions if I were seen here again. We may need supplies. There's a shop here called the Crossroads where we might be able to pick up a few things. Otherwise, we should be cautious. And this would actually be the Crossroads here on the left. Typically, your shops will be in a brown, boxy building like this. Everywhere Locklear looked, polished metal gleamed, as much a temple to war as any temple of Tiff. Tiff being the god of war, obviously. The cramp shop offered a startling variety of weapons and armor. And yeah, there is quite a bit of weapons and armor in here, but you'll note nothing we can really afford. Heck, we can't even afford to buy an armorer's hammer to repair our armor, but we can get a whetstone, which we definitely should do because, and you can try haggling, but yes, we're going to be looting a lot of material off of the corpses of our enemies, and if you can repair the armor and weapons you find, it helps you sell it for more. So a whetstone and an armorer's hammer are a very good investment. Would that we could afford this one at the moment. And this store is going to be very important to us starting out because this store will buy just about anything almost, and it's the only store that will buy some of the more exotic weapons and armor that we can find. Strangely enough, for what's supposed to be such a big city, there's no inn, and nobody... Definitely not a good idea. This is my aunt's house. As much as I would enjoy the opportunity to explain why I'm traveling with Moradhel, I think we should leave. Yeah, there's hardly anybody in this town, except for the shop. And locked building. But neat little trick a lot of people don't know. You can actually click on the lock, and if it's a type of common lock you're familiar with, there's a chance you might know what key will open it. In this case, the simple peasant's key will open it. And this gets us a set of armor for Owen. And that is the town of Yavin. Oh, and one other button here. When you're on a path, you can click on this one and it will keep you on the path. But for obvious reasons, we don't always want to stay on the path because, well, you run into more ambushes that way, such as this one right here. Now, if you see an enemy in the distance, you can right-click on them to identify what type of enemy it is. In this case, the Moradhel warrior hadn't noticed them. It's anybody's guess if he's going to kill us or is just out taking a stroll somewhere, Locklear said. Probably best if we just try to avoid him. And you can indeed try to sneak past enemies, but there's only 2 of them. We are 3. We have a chance of taking them. And I think that is what we shall start out doing next time. We will see you then.